All right, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, Congressman. I'm Nelson Rosario, the founder of Rosario Tech Law and the executive director of the Illinois Blockchain Association. I don't agree with everything you said. I'm sure everybody here may take issue or find very interesting a lot of the points that you raised. I had a couple of questions prepared, but to be perfectly honest, I think you've already addressed a lot of them. But I would like to kind of dig into, how do I phrase this? It seems to a certain extent you've done a lot of thinking, which makes sense as the head of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, as to how to, let's say, bring the industry into a position where it can interface with the traditional financial system and kind of thrive, in your view. So perhaps you could kind of walk through what that would look like tactically in practice, right? So let's say Vice President Harris wins, you become the ranking member on the subcommittee that you mentioned, or in charge of banking policy, and these sorts of issues start coming across your desk and your staffer's desk. What would be some concrete steps to kind of move some of these positions that you've articulated today?
Well, I think the first step in that, which is already taking place in Europe, is to establish a secure digital identity for every citizen who wishes one. And this is something that the EU is going to have in place. I think in about a year and a half, every citizen of the EU is going to have the right, if they wish, to be able to present their identity as a single legally traceable citizen of the EU and present that in an online environment. Because this is essential for the privacy bills, for example. If you think of all these privacy bills that are passing, one of the fundamental rights under these privacy bills is you have to be able to go to a company and say, tell me what information you're holding on me. To which the immediate answer is, well, who the hell are you, and how do we know that you're not some fraudster trying to steal that information? The only answer to that is to have you present a secure digital identity issued by the government that says, here is me, I am this single legally traceable person. The mechanism in the United States for that's being implemented, actually in Illinois just passed the legislation, are these digital driver's licenses. And these allow you to associate your Real ID compliant driver's license with your cell phone and use a modern cell phone's ability to biometrically identify its user. And so if you take those three things, the person, the biometric identification with the trusted electronics and the cell phone, the ability of a modern cell phone to be used for secure key storage, and connecting that with a federally recognized identity. Such as the Real ID compliant driver's license, then you have that same mechanism in the United States that the EU will have everywhere. And so that is the mechanism that is the first step to even have any kind of controlled anonymity, that you have to be able to say when you want to register a wallet, part of that will be prove you are who you say that you are and not someone faking who you are. This is also, I'm also on the Artificial Intelligence Task Force that Speaker Johnson stood up. And one of the big near-term emergencies are these deepfake impersonations, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And this now infamous $25 million heist that you know about with a financial firm, I think in Hong Kong, that had...
I think it was HSBC. It was a vice president there, authorized a wire transfer of $25 million after several video calls that they had with individuals that they thought were coworkers, but turns out they were just deepfake AI.
So there, yeah. So you go on a Zoom, and everyone there, your boss, your coworkers, are all deepfakes, and you talk over a project, and you say, yep, let's go ahead with this project. Great. To get started, transfer $25 million to this account. Everyone on that Zoom's a deepfake. All right, and so this is, this is coming at the public. And it's an emergency because many people are not as sophisticated as those financial people that got conned. And so everyone's first reaction is, okay, we're going to have some magic software that can identify deep fakes versus non-deepfake. And that's, to my mind, a lost battle. We're not going to win that one. But the other side of the coin is then you have to provide people with a means of proving that they are who they say they are. And so that, if someone can send me an email But unless they're willing to stand behind it by digitally signing it as a legally traceable person, I'll just put it in my spam filter. Because the internet's in the process of being turned into just a blizzard of robot-generated trash. I don't know how many of you even read your spam filter on your email these days. I mean, it's just crap. But I guess I'm probably a relatively high-value target, but I get some really high-quality spam. If someone's researched my children and sends me slightly misspelled emails from my children, okay, and stuff like this, and this is, and a lot of the stuff is obviously AI generated, and so the whole internet is going to be like that, and we're going to have standing between us and the internet, a very high quality AI filter to just scrape out the robot trash. But a key element to making that work will be to say, is there any legally traceable person standing behind this piece of content? Whether it's an incoming email to you or whether it's just something you click on the internet, that's going to have to be because of just the way that robot trash is ramping up. And so that's another reason why the secure digital identity has to be done and done quickly. We have heard rumors that either this week or maybe next, the administration, the White House, is going to put out an executive order on digital identity that I believe is going to give a very positive nod to the use of the mobile IDs, digital driver's licenses, for purposes like KYC. It's going to be specifically about using that for government purposes. So when you want to get your COVID unemployment insurance benefits or whatever, that will be the credential that you will present online. And so that there will be some standardization there. That will also be, if it goes like that, that will be the credential you'll present to get your license plate for your wallet. And that's a technically workable system. It would be very low burden on any fintech startup, any crypto startup. To simply just say, tell your customer, go get a mobile ID, a digital driver's license, use that to register this wallet, and then I'll do business with you and without worrying about KYC because it's got a wallet. And that's a very lightweight, technically workable system. And even just providing that as an option. Just telling fintech, go set up that API to issue license plates and see if anyone's interested. And then when you find that people want to buy NFTs without worrying about whether Melania is scamming them or not, they'll say, okay, I want to buy an NFT that actually has registered wallets for all the previous owners, so I know there aren't wash trades involved and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I think that's a technically workable starting point, and then you could just let the market decide on that one.
Okay, so step one.
Step one, secure digital ID.
Secure digital ID.
Step two, FinCEN, for example, sets up an API that allows you to associate your digital ID with a wallet that you want to get a license plate for. And then, open source software standards that say, here is how you inspect the license plate to make sure it's valid and that sort of stuff.
So you've covered a lot of themes that are relevant to the industry and kind of top of mind as people design solutions to, whether it's market beneficial things or market failures, et cetera. I represent startup clients in the AI and crypto space, and some of the ideas you've talked about are things that I've had clients work on. Additionally, I think you touched on, I don't know if it's the central kind of perhaps culture clash, hot button issue with respect to privacy and identity, the fact that there isn't a trust layer in the internet, right? Or an identification layer. Trust and identity were not built into the internet at first. It was, how do you get, resilient communication in the event of a nuclear war?
Sure.
And back in the 50s when they started all of this, right? I'm a little nervous to be specific on details because I'm worried he's going to correct me and probably knows far more about this than I do. But how do you overcome what I would say is, based on recent and past history, just in the U.S. and elsewhere, concerns with respect to kind of creating the mother of all honeypots with respect to digital ID as the kind of fulcrum by which the industry can kind of move forward into the mainstream? Does that question make sense?
Well, yeah, you're just worried about the cybersecurity of the digital
Yeah.
ID.
Well, and just kind of concentrating.
Yeah, well, you have to understand there are a number of vulnerabilities right now. Yeah, for example, everyone kind of trusts the cryptography in your handset. That when you have any kind of wallet or anything like that, you say, okay, that has secure, there's a secure enclave in your iPhone if you use those. And so you have to kind of trust that. And you can go out on the Black Hat conferences and you can see gleeful German graduate students telling, here's how I extract the keys, the private keys from my iPhone 6. And then there's a very interesting set of classified briefings you can have if you're a member of Congress about, okay, what about higher numbered iPhones? Which ones actually have secure key storage and which ones can you, break the operating system and lift the keys from the allegedly secure storage? Because if for any system, including wallets that are based on the secure key storage of an iPhone, that's an important question. And you need someone you trust to look over every new iPhone and say, okay, that has, this iPhone is good enough, and as far as we know, they're not holes in the secure key storage and the trusted silicon there. The same way when you go through National Airport, that says, oh, we promise you we will throw away this picture we're taking of you in 48 hours. Okay, you need someone you trust, and we don't have that in the federal government right now. A trusted entity to go through, if you're making that kind of claim, to have someone paid really high salaries to look hard at this allegedly trusted silicon in any of these systems. And so I think that no one short of the government, I think, is ever going to have the level of trust there. And it's a missing piece. So that's when you say, what are the other missing pieces in this? No matter how you want crypto to develop, you're going to need to have someone calling balls and strikes on when you can trust specific pieces of silicon. And that means tracing it all the way back through the foundry and the whole business with trusted. There's a lot of the chips and science money that's going into developing systems of trusted foundries to avoid exactly this problem. And this is, it's crucial. So it's another thing. You can't avoid the fact that you're going to have to trust the government at some point, all right? And this is sort of the nature
I
of
think
it.
that is kind of
Okay.
the cultural clash, if you want to call it that. But
Well, that's why you have elections to go and hire, and you got to elect smart people that'll go and kick the tires inside and get those classified briefings and see, is this bullshit or not? That when someone says this iPhone is safe against hacking and the secure key storage is secure, that at least one or two members of Congress, like, I need any one of you to run for Congress, please, because I'm feeling lonely being the only chip designer in Congress, but actually just go in there and say, what are the tests that you've run to make sure that this trusted silicon can be trusted? It's a missing piece, and it's not even clear which federal agency right now was the right one to assign to that.
yeah, so perhaps you could talk a little bit about, to the extent that you're familiar with, which I'm sure you are, about advancements, at least in the blockchain industry, with respect to things like the use of zero-knowledge proof technology, secure multi-party computing, things like that. I mean, I have a couple
Sure,
of...
no, we had a whole hearing on this. In the last session of Congress, I was the chair of the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And one of the big problems with AI is that you have to train it on a huge amount of data, much of which is kind of private. Like we just sort of grit our teeth and let Google read all of our Gmails. Probably how many of you use Gmails in the audience? A lot of you, admit it, come on. And so that means Google is sitting there training its AI on all of your Gmails. And you're sort of trusting Google because they never lie about incognito mode on their browsers and stuff like that. And so I think, well, I don't know. I've sort of lost the thread here.
Yeah,
what was the thread you were talking
development. So, for example, I have a couple of clients that are using zero-knowledge proof.
Yeah, zero-knowledge proofs. Yeah,
as well as multi-party computation.
So we had a whole
efforts,
thing on homomorphic encryption, which is another name for all this, and so and I've been interested in that for a long time because of the promise that it had, and at least this was probably 3 years ago. It wasn't really ready for prime time. That it was so compute intensive that it wasn't feasible. The dream that somehow, all of your emails will reside on your phone and maybe you'll have an encrypted cloud backup of them. But then when Google wanted to train its AI on how to autocomplete on all of your emails, they'd be able to somehow use the compute engines in your cell phone while you're sleeping at night and someone was paying for the electricity, that you can, and not wrecking the battery. That Google could then train their AIs on encrypted data sets. And that is theoretically, I have been told, I have not spent the week of my life studying whether it's true, but I've been told by people I trust that is sort of marginally technically feasible right now. But it's just tremendously expensive compute-wise, and that's going to be the problem. It's not going to be something that a startup can do. And one of the biggest problems with AI generally is that there's a problem with all digital businesses. They're natural monopolies. If you think about the first one we saw was like Microsoft Word, right? It cost Bill Gates nothing to add a marginal customer to Microsoft Word, but a new entrant cost $1 billion just to get the first product out the door. And this doesn't mean Bill Gates is evil for that reason, but it means that, but he is, it's just he got there first, and it's a natural monopoly. AI makes it much worse because if for AI to work well, you need a big customer base so that you can scan their data, and that will be a bigger advantage to the incumbents than they simply get by having a digital business and the returns to scale. And so that there may be, in that case, a government role in mandating somehow some form of data sharing that doesn't completely wreck privacy. And that's okay. And that is the killer app for homomorphic encryption. If people could say, okay, go ahead and read some encrypted version of my private data, train your engines on that, and if that can generate a satisfactory product, that is the hope for in my mind, for homomorphic encryption.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I agree completely on the last point. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I think that assurance to the public...
That's better than like 50% of my voters. So.
But I think that does go a long way, probably more than people realize, to kind of addressing a lot of the concerns people have with respect to privacy and kind of turning everything over to the government. I mean, I think... as you know, historically, this industry has been very skeptical of centralized power, government, et cetera. So one thing, and then perhaps if you don't mind, we could turn it back over to questions, but do you think, as we were talking about earlier, you become the ranking member, things are moving forward, we're going to get some sort of form of digital ID. Do you anticipate that this process, as part of trying to address those concerns that people have with respect to privacy, this process would be very open, or would this necessarily have to be closed door kind of hearings, or? No,
we don't have everything, with one exception. So I think we've had one classified hearing in all my time on the Financial Services Committee. Okay. And so that is,
well, that's good.
It's all very open, because all the banks are screaming at us all the time. They just want to lever up all the time until they explode. And this is hopefully an ancient game. It's an ancient game, It's an ancient.
Well, hopefully you put it all on GitHub and YouTube, et cetera, and we can comment real time.
Oh, it's still out there. I think, I came into Congress in March of 2008, and so the famous hearing where you had the 8 failed giant bankers. I was a junior member of the committee up in front. All the senior guys like Barney Frank were up on the dais in the back of the hearing room, and I was up front with the witnesses. And when we had, Hank Paulson up in front of us watching the sweat drip down on his forehead, it was an interesting trial by fire in this business. But a lot of the risks in financial services are well understood, and they are willfully forgotten by participants. And that is, once you realize that, then you understand that a lot of innovation is simply repackaging of old ideas to,
new paradigms.
Well, new paradigms. But, the way to make money generally is to either sell a better product for a better price, or to sell something to someone where they don't understand that it's lower quality than you're saying, or the risks are higher than you're saying. Those are the two fundamental ways. The company I started, I don't know if you hit on that. When I was 19, my little brother and I started this company that makes about 60% of all the theater lighting equipment, in which So we're 90% of the lights on Broadway, 50% of touring rock and roll, and so on. But we've got about 1,300 employees and manufacturing in the Midwest, which I'm very proud of. But we succeeded by building a better product, okay? And we did not just say, okay, find a bunch of clueless customers and sold them a risky product for a lower price. And so you have to be very careful to distinguish those two kinds of profits.
Well, let's take some questions. I don't have control of the mic out there, so.
Thanks. So I would actually want to touch base to the previous question, the first question that was asked. And the question is whether there is a chance that one day Bitcoin will be a reserve currency for international currencies, including dollar, and whether there is a gap in banking, gap in fintech to say it so. So there are three theories, as we know, a money theory, right? And one of them is that banks are intermediaries. There is another theory that the banks are not intermediaries, but they are directly creating money out of thin air, right? So I mean, if you connect all these two positions and the two topics, like, do you see that one day happening, or what's your take on this? Thanks.
Well, the reason that one of the reasons people trust the Federal Reserve is that it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. That means that you can always pay your taxes in US dollars at a fixed amount. Unless Bitcoin gets to the state where it has a fixed value, which I don't think is the goal of many speculators in Bitcoin, that if it has a truly fixed value, that it can be safely used for people to pay their taxes in, then I think it doesn't. That's the thing. You want to say that I'm going to go work at a job at a fixed salary. I'm going to pay X% of that salary to the government, and that is the social contract that gets our government funded. If you say, well, I'm going to go and buy this many lottery tickets for the government and pay my taxes and that's not acceptable either for the person or the government. And so that's why you need to have a stable value. So paying your taxes in stable coins would be completely acceptable. I don't think the government should take upon itself the speculative risk of trading in something that has an uncertain value. And so I think it's just not the job of government.
All right,
and it would be a big problem, if you decide to put a bunch of taxpayer money in a crypto asset that crashes in value, you're going to have a lot of voters pissed at you, all right? And that's...
Yeah, that's true. Time for one more question here.
Hey, thanks so much for hosting this and for the questions as well. I'm curious about your thoughts on the future of the interface between something like FedNow and crypto, as well as sort of some of the more governance-oriented elements of blockchain, and just where do you see this relationship going, and do you think it will be embraced or rejected, or what do you think is the necessary criteria for something to be embraced?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most interesting things that's happened is the Andhar system in India, which maybe many of the good things that are claimed about payments in crypto have been achieved in India. But simply they have a digital ID. Every citizen of India has a digital ID. They get out their cell phone. They prove they say they are. If you want to give, if there's a pauper in the street and you want to give them a small payment with zero fees, you both get out your cell phones. You use your cell phone to authorize yourself as the owner of this bank account. And for zero transaction fees, you can give an arbitrary small amount of money. That solves the problems except for the fourth criterion of privacy. That system was set up in India to deal with corruption. And the government has visibility into everything that's paid in that manner, and that's not okay with me or most people. But you can make systems that obscure that, cryptographically obscure the nature of those transactions, and still have the very low cost way of doing a point-to-point transaction on there. So there's a whole class of things that you can, and it's very interesting to see in India that the government sets up the payment rails, and then there's all kinds of value-added startups that have built on that system because it's such an easy set of rails to plug into. And so if we accomplish something like that, based on crypto and registered wallets, you could have that same ecosystem of things built just because it'll be so easy to connect to.
All right. Well, thank you, Congressman. This has been fascinating. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.